This is episode 8 of the ongoing pseudocode series, and in this episode we're going to be looking at variables. So variables, before you can even use a variable, you actually need to even identify. So we did mention that in the previous episode, I think, that identifier names, you can either use camel case or Pascal case, and we also underlined the importance of having to be consistent when you are making use of when you are using variable names. So if you are going to pick camel case, you might want to make sure that you always use camel case throughout the file. And if you are going to go with Pascal case, you also need to make sure that you use Pascal case throughout the entire file. Then another important thing to remember is that you need to also make sure that you do not use any known keywords as variable names. So for instance, you cannot have a variable name called repeat, because you know that repeat is a pseudocode reserved keyword, so you cannot call your variable name repeat for any reason. So that's another rule that you need to make sure you remember whenever you're naming variables or whenever you're picking identifiers for your either variables, constants, procedures, or functions. Then the format for declaring a variable, I'm going to use meta variables here, then I'll give you an example for each atomic data type. So we are going to have the declare keyword followed by the identifier name and also the data type, right? So this is the template for declaring a variable in pseudocode. Then let's actually go ahead, skip a single line, then actually declare some variables right here. So let's say have a variable called level. Maybe this is for we are programming a game, and we want to store the current level that the player is on. So we could have a variable called level, and it's of type integer. We can declare another variable called let's say progress. Actually, let's just call it price. This is of type real. Then we can also declare a variable called currency symbol, and this one will be of type character. Then we can also declare a variable called let's call this one state, not stated, just state, and the type is going to be boolean. Then let's also declare what's that one, string. So let's call this one a player name. Then this is best stored as a string. Then we can also declare another variable called date joint, and this would be of type date as it were. So that's how you can go ahead and declare variables for each type. Then it's also important to realize that whenever you declare variables, essentially you would want to initialize or to give initial values as it were. So this is just a declaration. It's important to realize that when you declare a variable like this, it actually doesn't have a variable, a value as it were. Declarations, I would spell declarations correctly, just like that. Then to assign values, now what we need to do is to make use of the left arrow. So let's say we needed to, let's try to put this initializing our variables. So we want to initialize level with a value of maybe let's say 0. So let's say before the game starts, you're actually on level 1 maybe. Then for price, let's actually assign an appropriate value. So price, it can be something like 230. For currency symbol, we can have something like a $sign. Then for state, we can have true, because we did declare state as a boolean there. Then for player name, you can go with Dream Chaser. Then for date joined, we can say 16. I remember the format that we said we use for dates, so you can have 16 January 2020, something like that. So that would actually be initializing our variables from lines 11 to 17. Then from lines 3 and to lines 9, that's essentially declaration. So when you declare a variable, you actually want to make sure that it is an initial value that you are working with. Then you, of course, you can always modify the value as your program progresses, but it's always a good idea to have an initial value as it were. So yeah, that's just about it for this episode. I'll see you in the next one.